Absolutely, it is. Shall we move on to another story? And this has to do with school sex education, Nigel.
Yes, it does indeed. And this is Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, who's writing to schools to say they must tell parents exactly what their children are learning in sex education classes. Schools have been sort of trying to delay all this and put obstacles in the way. One of them is copyright. They're saying that they can't share this because it's the copyright of the people who produce it. Gillian Keegan's having none of that. She's saying that parents must know what their children are learning. Absolutely right. I mean, I don't think parents should have a veto over the classes their children go to, but I don't see why sex education should be any different from history or economics or English, where parents actually do know what they can learn.
I mean, this is quite incredible. The Department for Education is providing template letters to fight off claims of copyright infringement, presumably to parents who want to see this material. Do you think that's right?
Oh, it's mind-blowing that this is being done, that it's not just common cause that parents should absolutely see what their children are studying. I was a primary school teacher 25 years ago. I was a primary school teacher for 8 years in Tottenham. And I actually ended up leaving because the way we educate our children was becoming further and further away from the way that I felt children should be educated. You know, teachers, there's a lot of bullying that goes on in the staff room. I wouldn't have put up with this. I would have been handing out the leaflets to the parents straight away. There's no way I would be giving the 11-year-olds, 10, 11-year-olds that I was teaching this type of literature without letting the parents be aware. But I would have been sacked as a teacher. And this is the problem. You know, common sense has gone. And I said it to Nigel earlier. I said, the only people that don't want parents to know what their children are being told at school are paedophiles, because they want to groom them with this kind of sick ideology. Parents need to be absolutely aware of what their children are being taught at all times. I have children to bring them up. I do not want the state bringing up my children. It's my responsibility to see what my children are taught. And especially these things that are kind of coming through now that are just modern wokeism about gender and about all of this that's going on, and breast binding. And children, especially teenagers, young teenagers, have enough to go through. They go through a real period of turmoil, of finding themselves. We don't want to be putting things in front of them. They're going to make that harder.
But they ought to learn about those kind of things too. This is what I mean about now we get into the controversial areas where I think parents shouldn't have the right to veto. So the fact that we talk about trans issues so much, for instance, I think that must play a part in the education of children. They're going to be curious about it. They're going to ask about it.
Well, and if they do, then the parents can answer them at home, can't they? I don't think there's a place for education about trans at school.
Well, it may well be for a child will find it more comfortable to talk to a teacher than they would to a parent, especially if it's something that they are thinking about doing.
Well, we saw what happened with that student that questions trans ideology in the classroom. That teacher was absolutely vile to her because there is a complete political element about this. So I don't agree.
Yes, a recording was uncovered from a classroom where two girls, I think,
very bright,
were shown to be dismissed, let's say, in strong terms by their teacher when they questioned certain areas of the gender discussion. Do you not think that parents should have a right to withdraw their children from sex education, or do you think that shouldn't happen?
No, I don't actually. I mean, I think that there's no reason why a parent can't complain about it. There's no reason why a parent shouldn't discuss with the school. And I think that when it comes down to what the curriculum is, this is a job for Parliament to actually sort out. So once that's been established, no, because parents have to send their children to school or at least educate them in some way or another, and they can always get for homeschooling on that basis, that they shouldn't then withdraw.
Nigel, this is an ideology. Of course, sex education should be taught in schools, but children should be taught how, you know, as we used to say in the old days, the birds and bees work. But this is an ideology that I don't believe schools should be.
Well, they shouldn't be taught something political. I agree with you. I mean, politics shouldn't enter into.
But trans ideology is political. And therefore it shouldn't be taught to children.
Yes, but you could actually do it factually in the same way that if you were teaching politics to children, you can still do that in a neutral way without being partisan.
But the leader of the party that you follow can't identify what a woman is. So how are they going to teach it factually when the leader of the Labour Party can't even identify a woman?
I think the issue here is not necessarily what the curriculum is, but it's the materials that teachers use in the classroom. They're often provided by outside bodies, and so therefore there is this copyright
and
issue.
Who's ruling these bodies? Who's deciding if what these bodies are bringing into schools is correct?
Well, exactly, and that's clearly what the Education Secretary is trying to get a grip on.
Is there not a worry here that we saw what happened in Birmingham outside schools in the last couple of years, where religious groups have been trying to pull their own children out of schools, indeed hounding teachers at schools because they teach that gay people exist?
Yes.
And is there not a worry here that perhaps that same attitude might be behind some of this sex and relationship education scepticism that we're seeing now? Is there a parallel that can be drawn there?
Do you know, for me, there is a lot of common sense that goes on, and there's a lot of common sense that's been thrown out of the window. You know, a man is a man, a woman is a woman. Gay people, you know, are people that love the same sex. It's really confusing, though, with the trans issue, and I think that's where it gets very confusing. And teaching children, very young children, about breast binding, removing their breasts, this type of thing, I think at this complex time of their age shouldn't be down to the schools to decide. I think it needs a lot of reviewing before it's just thrown in by external bodies into schools of which parents can't see.
I think it's an extremely difficult one because, as Nigel says, children will ask questions. I mean, you know, the gender ideology, trans issues, transgenderism is something that they are exposed to. If they can't talk to their teachers about it, is that a problem? Is that a failure of education? I don't know. It's a difficult one. But certainly. I take your point, Tom, about the religious aspect. Could this lead to...
There are big questions in terms of how far the material goes. Is it just saying that trans people exist, or is it saying these are the processes that you can go down? I mean, those are two very different arguments. And I suppose transparency here is perhaps where the middle ground meets.
Yeah. Yes. You have to take in mind children's psychology, and that's what they don't take in mind. Things are catchy. You know, when in a school, when a child starts self-harming, for example, it becomes a group, and then you find that there's a strong percentage of those children that start self-harming. Same with anorexia and same with trans issues. So we have to be very careful with teenage psychology and the way their brains are being formed.
There is certainly an element of social contagion in our schools, I'm sure.